Welcome to Generation Hope, a podcast by connect.faith. This season, we're talking to young adults who are pursuing careers that don't always have linear paths to entry. We'll be talking to musicians, visual artists, and lots of others about the unique challenges and rewards young creatives can face as they turn a passion into a career. Today, I'm talking to Danielle Mareka, who is a fashion model, producer, and community organizer based out of New York City. Thanks for being here. Why don't we just start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a Guyanese migrant. I come from a single-parent, all-femme household, and I've always had an interest in fashion, but given my background, my family doesn't really understand career paths that are non-traditional. I just went with what I was good at or excelling at in high school and throughout our more formative years, and then got to NYU and I ran track there, and I ended up meeting a lot of people on my team who basically were into fashion, film, photography, and I ended up doing my first developed photo shoot with one of my teammates because they were interested in photography, and we literally went into one of the dorm buildings, the game rooms, and set up a backdrop and all this other stuff, and that was my first kind of shoot. And then from that point, I don't know what led me to this or what gave me this conviction, but I just kept kind of following my heart and using Instagram as a tool and just posting. I remember there was a time where I was posting every single day and I didn't really care about what the external perception was, but I realized that it was leading to people either sending me castings, just opportunities that they thought might be a fit for me. And I ended up sophomore year going to Fashion Week castings and then walking my first Fashion Week show for an official. And I was able to walk for Kim Shui. And then following that, I ended up meeting a casting director for Lilith Makeup out at a Black Girls Magic event. And then I did Black Klansman. It was this momentum that just kind of took off. And I will say I was pretty naive in just feeling oh, this is it. I figured it out. It's going to work out right now. Yeah, I remember just, especially with the security net of being in college and living on campus and all of that stuff, I just felt like everything was going to be free. And that is just not how it works, at least in my experience. But I graduated a semester early, thinking that I was just going to dive right in and get an agency. At the time, I was really focused on getting signed to an agency and doing my own test shoots or setting up shoots myself with friends or just people that I was just very vigilant, and one opportunity kind of leads to another. And then with graduating and just getting more experience, I got signed about 2.5 going on 3 years ago to my first New York agency, and was still largely because they are an agency that's non-traditional as well. And it's called We Speak Models, but it's really the motto is for models by models. So it's all about just really retaining your autonomy and individual identity, because that's not always celebrated in the modeling industry in terms of people kind of having a vision for how you should be presented. And I've never really been that type of person to kind of follow what someone else is going to tell me, how I'm going to present myself or how I'm going to kind of fit into the mold. It was a really good fit. And I think as I was growing and learning a lot of things, they were growing and learning a lot of things. And then I got signed to an LA agency. So I'm definitely just there's a lot of learning when it comes to the industry because there's no one really guiding you. It's a very individual career path and just experience. You can't really compare it to someone else's, but that's kind of where I'm at now. Yeah.
That is quite the journey. And I appreciate how you said things were going really well and I was kind of naive and thought, I have this figured out. We're good to go. All right. I was wondering, you said at the beginning, right when you first started, that you weren't sure exactly what kept you interested or why you decided to make that first step, but you did it and you went for it. Now that you're a few years into this and you've kind of dedicated yourself to it, what does keep you going? What is it that you enjoy about being a fashion model that makes you want to continue pursuing it?
So I really believe that expression through beauty, or just like whatever that means to you, is really transformative, and it can really shift your perception of self and also how people receive you. And at the end of the day, it's all about being confident and finding that self-love and just radiating that. And I think that's a really attractive force. And that's really where my interest lies. I love really like interchanging my looks, and especially my hair. I've learned so much about how to do my own hair, experiment with different looks, and it's kind of gone beyond hair. It's gone into makeup. In the pandemic, I was really experimenting with makeup, and that led to 3 Beauty Vogue features and 2 headlines where I was sharing an article with Doja Cat and Ashley Graham and those types of people. I didn't really understand how creative I was growing up. And I think I was really focused on sports and like academics and these other avenues. But at the core of it all, I feel like going to college really helped me discover that I'm multiverse and that I'm creative. So I feel like I got the space to just kind of experiment in that way. And to get back to what keeps me going, I think once I did projects or once I did jobs where I wasn't really at the beginning I was unrepresented. I learned to negotiate, advocate for myself. And when I was booking those things without an agent, a lot of people, honestly, my community kept reinforcing like, no, you're doing it. And we see that in you, and that kind of validation. And even just, I remember early on, I did like a small gig for Milk Makeup. I did a campaign for Glossier and those types of things. I was like, okay, this isn't necessarily financially stable right now, but I'm in the right direction.
I love you started off by saying expression through beauty is such a wonderful thing. And I love that framing of it. You talked about how that was really important to you because individual autonomy is not always celebrated in modeling. But then you also talk about how creative you get to be within this field. How do you find those two things playing with each other where you're trying to show off your creativity and follow that passion of yours, but also in an industry where sometimes you're just being told what to wear and what to do? How do those two things play into each other, and how do you deal with that?
So I think I've been really blessed with a unique kind of experience where my agency is really not traditional, and they kind of framed it where, especially where they were kind of early on in their journey as an agency, they've grown so much since then. But in that time, I think their real message, they aligned with my values, and their real message was, we want you to be you. And there's open communication. I've seen contracts where they're like, you are not to touch your hair, color it, cut it, unless you are notifying your team, and I just can't, I wouldn't be able to like flourish in that environment.
Yeah.
And, especially as a Black woman, like I change my appearance all the time. And I feel like, specifically, of course, my hair, that's really what I'm referring to. But I just feel like they really understood me. And so my mentor and friend is Coco Mitchell, the first Black model for Sports Illustrated. And she's still working to this day. And she's very iconic. If people don't know her, you should look her out. But absolutely a pioneer in the space, especially for Black models. And she herself, I met with her last week, and she was saying, I never really played the game or like played into things. And I never really saw it that way. I always have tried to stay true to myself. And I feel like We Speak honors that. And because I've built that precedent or that aura, the people who I work with also, I think, see that in me and we align now. So I feel like a lot of people, it's not really, it's a lot of personal relationships and growing with designers. And as they've gotten bigger and they're, in Target, or they're making these moves of like going from independent to quote unquote mainstream, I'm being celebrated for me, or like I'm being chosen for jobs that celebrate Black beauty or like certain things I talk about. So I just feel blessed in that regard. And I think that, there is a line with like understanding where you might have to play down certain things and play up certain things. But I do feel like I've been able to just kind of, I'm making the rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm grateful. And I really think that's because of We Speak and the environment that they create, honestly. And just the community they really try to enforce, like having Zoom meetings with all the models and like challenges and picnics. I don't know what other agencies do, because it's, like I said, it's kind of like working for, different companies. So it's like,
Sure.
Every company has its own kind of environment, but I really love how they've done things. And before I got signed to them, I had been dropped from managers. I had been like almost signing questionable contracts, and then having, a friend's parent who was a lawyer revise it and try to jump in and advocate for me. So I feel like I've had a lot of protected experiences where people, either they, and I said this earlier today, but sometimes rejection is protection. And I feel like, a lot of people have go to open call where if you're not familiar, that's almost like an open audition. So you can just come into an agency and, they take photos of you, you walk, you kind of meet whoever's like reviewing everyone that day. But, you're competing with, sometimes, especially when it's summertime and people aren't in school and all of that stuff, it's like, it could be hundreds of people coming a day, and, you're just shooting your shot. You're just trying your best and like an experience. And I did so much of that I started this journey when I was 12, but because of being so young, being in school, I remember I started to miss some classes, and my mom was like, this is it. We're not doing this. I just think by putting myself in those situations, I put myself out there, and I kind of got used to, the modeling industry is heavy on rejection, being told no and wondering why me, and internalizing a lot of this stuff when I didn't have a full scope of where I sat in the industry, my experience level. And also just like, sometimes it's just right timing, right place, right time, and a little bit of luck as well. So I had to learn a lot of those things and go through a lot of no's, but I'm so grateful for how everything's played out and how I've been able to kind of mature without jumping into something because, I wanted someone to give me a chance, or,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It seems like you built a support system around you through your agency, through people's dads who were lawyers who could see that for you. But like it seems like you knew your value and you surrounded yourself by people who knew it too. And those were the people who could take you farther on the journey. So you mentioned a little bit, you've mentioned throughout some of the hardships of the industry, the rejections of it, and then also how it is seen as a non-traditional career. And there are a bunch of stereotypes that come with this career. I wonder how, first of all, how many of those stereotypes you have found yourself facing, and what fighting against that has been like, both professionally and for your mental health.
So I think the hardest thing about modeling, especially when you're starting out, is rejection, whether it's people to your face. A lot of things are done over Zoom or over email now, or virtual castings. That's a lot of stuff that happens now. But when I was really starting to do all of this, I would go to an agency in person. Yeah. I would go to an agency in person, and, someone would flip open your book right in front of you and be like, no, thank you. or like I had a really, just a lot of those where you're like really questioning yourself. And I feel like that's the one thing that, you do have to be really thick skinned or develop that, and just like not really take things too personally. And I know that's virtually impossible, but you learn to kind of separate the business side of things and then you as an individual. And I would say, some other stereotypes. The first one I'm referring to is how tough it is. And the other one is there's an assumption that, there's a lot of wealth around the career, or like, I feel like my perception, and I guess it's naivety, but was that it was going to be so smooth and I was going to be so set up so quick. And it doesn't work like that. A lot of this stuff is based on building a network and a clientele. If you have good relationships with your clients, it'll foster and it'll grow, and you'll continue to, someone will recommend you somewhere. But I never really, that was something that I struggled with at first. And I feel like I'm now affirming to myself that you're okay. Like you're doing it, and you've progressively gotten more and more accomplishments and more opportunities. I think that's the biggest thing, is that in the beginning, I feel like I had no concept even of like certain financial stuff, or how to negotiate. That's another thing. Like you have to be able to, especially starting off, my experience was independent. I didn't get signed right away. So it took like 2 years for me to even get one agency to take me seriously after I had been to so many. I honestly visited all of them, every single open call that I could go to. And I would repeatedly every 3 to 6 months go back, and was really persistent. But I think that's the thing. And in terms of mental health, I feel like I was younger, and I understand how that did take a toll on me, especially with like graduating, feeling like I kind of had to bear everything on my shoulders, and that no one before me I felt like had this path laid out. Like I was making my own example, and that's confusing. That's uncertainty. And I didn't always know. And I don't like that. I'm a Capricorn. I don't like that. So I like to be in control. I like to kind of know what's going to happen next. Yeah. And that's something that I really struggled with. But I also want to touch on race, and the fact that I will say the industry has grown and become more accepting of whether it's shapes, genders, like race, and just changing the narrative. But there still is a level of, conservatism that hasn't been fully addressed, and is partially still performative, in my opinion. And I feel like we've gotten a lot better. I have shoots. I had a MAC shoot recently, and it was essentially an all Black team, from the makeup artist to the stylist to her assistants. And that was really beautiful to see. Such a major corporation. One of the nail techs was telling me that she's been in this industry for over 20 years and it was never like this. So I appreciate how far things have come, but I feel like in terms of whether it's the runway, or commercials, or just seeing certain clients and how they might use or just play into tokenism, I'll say it that way. But so those are some things that I think still need some work, especially because I am Guyanese American. So I also am not African American, and my experience is a little different.
I think one of the things that popped into my mind as you were talking was the idea of the traditional beauty standard, right? And like what we expect to see upheld as this is what a beautiful person looks like. But so how have you been able to push back maybe against some of those traditional beauty standards through the work that you do?
I think a lot of fashion sometimes celebrates a very clean, especially when it comes to like high fashion, a very like clean look, or they're just appealing to a certain type of look. I don't really know how to say it, but the best way I can describe it is like this clean, like simple look. And I feel like I'm really into experimentation. And I think whether it's me organizing my own shoots and being able to work with friends who let me kind of share my vision and trust me in that, I've been able to create my own stories and like my own fantasies. And so I think in that way I've been unconventional in a sense, because I don't really, that's another way I don't think I play into things. But separate from my specific work in terms of shooting, I also gained a following on TikTok because I was sharing tips about how to become a successful independent model or start your modeling career through just my own life experience of just jumping into it. And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not tall, I can't model. And it's like, if you don't live in New York or somewhere like LA, but I feel like New York is the best range, has the best range of just diversity and really unique projects and casts. And it's just looser in terms of who they're willing to have just be show. I always tell people that's like the number one thing people say, like, oh, I'm not tall, I'm not skinny. And I'm like, you don't have to be that. You really don't. There's such a wide range of jobs, whether it's beauty, whether it's parts, which is like hand and jewelry, like ears and stuff. Like there's such a range of like things people can do that you don't think of. I think the common, like, people just jump to the idea of runway, and that's just not the only form of modeling. I mean, it's very specific, but I think, of course, runway has a long ways to go, but even that, it's like, I see castings in New York where people are not 5'10" and up, like there's petite models now, and there's very successful models doing a lot of beauty campaigns and working for brands like Pink and that are my friends. So I just see it in real time. And I think by reinforcing that on platforms like that, where it might be a younger audience, I think that's a way I've noticed people having a new perception of the industry in today's world.
Yeah. I want to talk more about on the theme of in today's modern world. You mentioned at the beginning that you used Instagram as kind of a stepping stone to get into this. And then you just mentioned that through TikTok, you've been able to gain more of a following. And one of the themes that has come across as I've been interviewing people for this season is the issue of access and the issue of, like, I talked to some visual artists and it costs money to apply to every art gallery. I'm assuming it costs money, like if you need headshots taken for an open call. And so I was wondering how you might see social media as a tool when it comes to that challenge of access, and what the pros and cons are there in the world of modeling.
Okay, so I'll start with the cons and then we'll end on a positive note. But the biggest con that comes to mind is feeling the pressures of social media becoming a job instead of a place that I really enjoy. I don't look to it as like any type of personal space. It's really just for me to keep connected with people in that sphere of like modeling, fashion, and entertainment, and the inspiration that helps me with my own projects. But I don't utilize it to connect with friends or family or people that I've known. I'm like, if you have my phone number, we're cool. But I don't use Instagram in that way. So I think that, there was a time where I felt really pressured. Like I said, I posted every day at one point, and I felt the pressure to keep up with that. And, I'm thankful that I've kind of let go of that. But there was a time where I felt very strongly about it. I felt very stressed about if I didn't have a certain amount of likes or if it didn't resonate with people. And I felt like it was a direct reflection of clients, given that I was taking the independent route. It's not like an agent was just setting me up with a client, you know? I really had to be vigilant and looking for castings, calling casting directors, being just vocal, and people being like, okay, this is what, you know, she's asking for, she's putting out. And people kind of just reciprocated that and really tried to help me, because I just, like I said, every agency rejected me at first, you know? So I would really be open about it too, in terms of people that I was meeting along my journey in the industry, or new or friends, you know, in the sphere of it all. So that's the con, I would say. That's the biggest thing for me. And I'm very grateful that Instagram introduced hiding likes, because I think it's very freeing to just be like, this is how I want to showcase myself. No company is going to ask me engagement rate or calculate my engagement rate without, you know, like there's certain things that go behind advertising and marketing using your platforms. The pros are that I think you're exposed to opportunities you would never really have access to or know beforehand. And when there's casting directors that really leave it open to anybody. So if you see it, you know, you jump on that opportunity. And I've gotten, you know, I was in, like years ago, I was in like a Young Thug Lil Yachty music video, or like things like that I just saw on Instagram. And I ended up building a relationship with the casting director. You keep in touch over all of these projects, you know, over time. So I think it's a great tool, but it's a double-edged sword. And in terms of TikTok, that to me is a huge driving force for growth, because the way that's set up is that they really push, you know, you discovering new people that you wouldn't be exposed to otherwise. At first, treated TikTok like it was a joke, and I was just like laying around and honestly like doing like dances and just like having fun. But then I realized there was this, I didn't really see models talking about my experience or what I had like. I kind of started to put that together, and as I spent more time on it, I was like, I should make a video and just do like, I think it started with like how to become a model, or like modeling in NYC. And I compiled videos of like old shoots that I had or whatever. And then, you know, I did one how-to where I started speaking about, you know, just sites that you could go on, and not too slowly, but it started to take off, and I ended up getting from like 300 to 500,000 views. Like I got almost 900,000 on one of them, and then 3 million on, you know, so my account really started to grow. I started to just focus on that as my niche, and it would really introduce me to just people that were genuinely interested in fostering this like belief in yourself. Because at the end of the day, at least in New York, I know it's different in Europe, it's different in these other places, but here you can genuinely be successful if you're just confident.
What you talked a little bit about at the very beginning, the fact that this is, I think you used the term, a non-traditional career. So if you were approached by someone who maybe was thinking about getting into this world, but their family really wanted them to, I don't know, be a doctor or a lawyer or something that was a little more financially stable, the structure was more familiar to them, what advice would you give that person?
So I would advise them to, at least my cultural background, I felt like I had to honor that and at least set myself up for quote unquote a plan B. I don't necessarily believe in like setting yourself up for a plan B, because you might fall into that. I just wanted to have that security, and I felt very confident in the fact that no matter what, I have a public health and sociology degree, and I feel like I can spin that in a way that suits me. And I just think that I do believe if you think it's right for you, that you should pursue your education, because it taught me, it's not even just about the degree that I got. I think the people I met, the environment, being in the city, all of that really helped shape this. You know, it's not just the classes I went to. So I do believe in like having that experience, but still pursuing. I was pursuing it on the side. I was just, doing it was like an internship in a way. So I think if you're interested, try to get in as early as possible. Try to see if it agrees with you. If you like it, you learn through experiences and take it from there. And if you don't like it, if it's not for you, you go from there. But at least try. And I think timing is, if you can do it right, will be on your side. And I think at the end of the day, it's best to try everything. I know models that try to assist, or like, there's such a range of things to do in fashion, and a lot of people view it as this jumping point. But you can be a stylist, you can be a casting director, you can be a makeup artist, a nail tech, a hairstylist, so it's whatever, the photographer, the creative director, the art director, the set designer. There's like so many layers I didn't know existed in production.
Yeah.
Or in setting up these photos. And the more you put yourself in that environment, you'll like be exposed to more. So that's my advice.
And I love that. And I love the framing of, it was just like an internship, because that's totally something somebody could take back to the parents and be like, it's just an internship.
Exactly.
Okay. I think those are all of the questions that I had written down. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about?
The one thing I wanted to say is that I don't think I always knew. One, I didn't always move in confidence. I didn't always appreciate my beauty. I didn't always love myself. I kind of had to I had to grow as a person, but I also had to find an appreciation for myself. And that took time, and that took growing up. And I don't want it to come off as like, oh, I just followed my heart, and I was like this girl that walked in the room when I did that. Like, no, I've had plenty of, being rejected feels disheartening, but I've had embarrassing experiences in an agency. I remember the first like big open call I went to, I was 12, or no, I had just turned 13. And there were these guys shirtless. Like, I just was not exposed to that. I was really young. I was really uncomfortable. I didn't know you're supposed to bring heels to those things. I didn't really know how to walk,
Mm-hmm.
You're going in front of everybody. Like, there's certain environments where you have to just do it in front of everyone that's there. And it was scary. It was really scary. So I think the more you throw yourself in it, I, over time, over years, ended up growing my armor, or building my armor. And I'm at a point where, when I walk into a room, I'm very comfortable in my own. And I remember being on shoots being like, I don't really know. People be like, how are you? I'm like, I don't know what apartment I'm going to move into. I don't know, figuring out just being an adult, because I was transitioning to adulthood, and it was confusing, and but I think you just have to kind of be open to putting yourself out there.
Yeah. I like that you're admitting that, like, you can say all this now, but back then you wasn't.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth of it, honestly.
If people want to know more about you or connect with you, how can they get in touch with you, or where can they follow you?
Okay, so my name is Danielle Mareka. It's at Danielle Mareka on all platforms. I'm soon coming to YouTube. I want to be more, I want to be more in depth. And there's a certain cap, I think, to TikTok in terms of how much you can showcase and speak on, because it's more catered to short form content. But I would love, it's very intimidating, but I would love to get into YouTube. And in terms of contacting me, I do have a Discord page. So I welcome people just DMing me on Instagram. And I'm trying to build a community where people ask questions about modeling and can kind of have a direct line to me as well.
I love that you're so open to helping others and making it a little bit easier for the next person.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this podcast is called Generation Hope because I try to interview people who I think will give hope to listeners through experiences that maybe they've never gotten to really hear the backgrounds of before, or listening to their experiences of overcoming hardship or overcoming the really embarrassing things at 13 and now being hugely successful, right? So that being said, the hope is that you're offering hope to someone out there right now. I'm going to turn it around on you and ask you the two questions I ask everyone who comes on this podcast. So the first one is, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope? I think what gives me hope is honestly waking up each day and being alive. Not to be too shocking, but last year in June, I got into a truck accident where I was driving as a city and I got hit by a really big truck. But the car was totaled, but I had like 2 scratches on me, like 2 cuts in the glass. And I honestly have chills talking about it, but I'm just very grateful to be alive and to go through something essentially unscathed. Every day that I wake up is a blessing. And I just have a mindset where you have to make the most, even if you're resting. I'm not saying you have to be out here overly productive, but just making the most of your time and being intentional. That's the word. Yeah. That is kind of my new mindset and my framing.
Yeah, that gave me chills too. That's wow, that was beautiful. So my last question for you is, what do you hope for? And that can be for yourself, for the country, whatever scale you want. But what do you hope for?
Well, on a personal note, I do hope for a bold cover very soon.
Excellent.
Would love that. And aspirationally, I would love to get more into TV and film. And the lead in Squid Game, she was she started out her career as a model, and those people give me a lot of hope. And I love modeling, but I always want to grow and expand. So those are some things that I have my eye on. But for the world, I just hope that we lead in compassion a bit more. And especially, I've been working in between New York and LA more frequently. And I've also noticed a real call to mental health and the impact of the pandemic on mental health. And I just hope that there's more resources made available and we as a society and a community kind of aid to that, because I think my perception is that we're in kind of this like swell and bubble that's swelling. But I think there is a mental health crisis, and I do think I hope that we tend to that a little better.
Yeah. And I love what you said, leaning into compassion. If we let that lead first, then hopefully more will follow. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And this has been Generation Hope, a podcast by connect.faith. Thanks for listening. We did it!